What's going on, you guys? Welcome to the Freedom Stories podcast. This is season 2, episode 3. You guys, and if you don't know, this podcast is dedicated to really walking you guys through the story of people making their journey towards freedom. And I'm so excited today to introduce you guys to a dear friend, someone who I don't get to spend enough time with, Morgan Walker. Welcome, Morgan, to the podcast, y'all.
Hi, thank you. I'm excited.
Yes, me too. I have been looking forward to this. We've talked about doing this podcast for a while now. We finally are making it happen. And hey, you know, season 2 is better late than never, right?
Totally.
And so you guys, just to give you a little bit of a backdrop of who Morgan is, and then I'm going to let her kind of go deeper. There's so many things. She is working in so many ways on behalf of marginalized folks through most of her life. From what I've been able to see, she's done work abroad. She studied abroad, and now she gets to kick it, pun intended, with kids throughout Lake County. But I'll let her tell you a little bit more about who she is. So maybe if you want to give everybody a quick 30-second, 10,000-foot view of Morgan Walker.
Sure. Yeah. So grew up in Grays Lake, and went to church really close by to my house. Came to know the Lord in about like 3rd grade. We started going to church. We were like, oh, there's a church here, so we'll start going.
Well, hold on, you're going in. Okay, so
you want me to give you
this is good. This is great. I love that you just dove right in. So let's slow down and let's look at some of those influences in your life and walk me through you actually coming to know the Lord, because that coming to know the Lord piece, like that's a big part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Totally. Jesus happened.
Jesus happened. Yeah. So I grew up, like I said, in Grace Lake. Both of my parents grew up in Christian homes. My mom's family was Catholic and my dad's was Protestant. And they kind of, I think like a lot of people do in college, you know, you like get out of your church context and so once there's a camp, right, like a half mile from my house. So we started going there at Faith Church. So we started going there over the summers, and it was, really fun. And then, they shared the gospel with us. And when I was in about 3rd grade, I was like, yes, sign me up for this Jesus thing. I'm into it. So I asked my mom, like, why don't we go to church? And she was like, I don't really have a good answer for that. Let's do it. So we started going. And
time out real quick. So the camp, were your parents like supporting you or encouraging you into that camp, or was it just a camp that you're like, oh, I'll go?
Well, I mean, I was 8. So it's like, I think they were like, they definitely, I remember like my dad would read Bible stories and we would go to church, and then just, sometimes when you have like, I don't have kids, but I am around kids a lot, and I can imagine how it would become tricky with lots of little people to just be like, we're just going to stay home on Sundays. It's just too much.
Right.
And so I think they were really excited. Like, it's this, church community. The camp seems great. It's a half mile from our house. We need childcare. Let's send them there.
Gotcha.
So
there was already a faith background to the family.
Yes.
And then this was like, oh, this made sense. Like,
So I remember like reading like Bible stories. I remember like being very like upset when I watched like The Grinch and trying to like figure out. And then I was like, he just doesn't know baby Jesus. So, there was like some levels of it there, like was definitely a part of my upbringing and like my understanding of the world and things going on, but wasn't like our like typical every Sunday morning, my own. I didn't really know about like, oh, this is something you like accept or like make a decision on your own.
Sure,
as I think lots of little kids do. But so I think Jody Sinkmars was the director at that time, and she like shared the gospel with my group on, I think it was maybe the last day of camp, and I was like, yes, I am in. So and then I was like, well, I guess now we're supposed to go to church. And my mom had already been, I think, going to like a women's Bible study sometimes there, and so we started going. And then I think really shortly after, my dad and my brother started coming too, and we got like really plugged in. Awesome community there. and like all, I think my parents didn't grow up in traditions where you get baptized as an adult. And so they both, in becoming members of the church, got baptized. And then I got baptized shortly after that. So yeah, it was like really grew up within this community, which was, yeah, just like a very supportive of me as a person, of my family. I remember like when we were going through hard times, like they were the people that came around us. So it was very, easy to see this, at least from like my perspective of this, like, yeah, this is better. Like, this is good. Like, this is what it makes sense. It seems like it's being lived out. The things that God talks about of loving your neighbor and the community and what it looks like. And so, yeah, I grew up in youth group, got plugged into like, we went on a couple mission trips to New Orleans, really enjoyed meeting people there and making friends there. With people who have been, you know, growing up in some communities that were dealing with a lot of things that I personally never dealt with based on my, frankly, white privilege and like, just like socioeconomic status. And so it was really interesting to meet Christians that had lived, you know, like in some ways there's like these real similarities between, you know, the things we care about and how we love people, but also like quite a different experience in like our neighborhoods and the things that we were having to deal with at the time. So yeah, so that really got me hooked on, I think like, I was like, I'm going to be a missionary now. I'm going to like go to Africa and save all the children.
So wait, at that point, so this is on the first or second trip to New Orleans. You said you went on a couple trips.
Yeah, we went, I think I went on, so junior and senior year of high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in your junior, senior high school, you're experiencing things that are very different than your normal world, and you're kind of having your eyes opened to, oh wow, there's people who live very different than me, and yet like Jesus is there too, and like try now your heart is kind of getting pricked for this global understanding of who God is and those that need him, right? So what was emotionally like, what was that emotionally like? Now I know maybe I'm getting a little deep here, but what was that emotionally like as you were like sensing missions were a thing for you? Like if you can remember how you might have been feeling in that season.
Yeah, I think it felt like, to me, it felt like this. I mean, I really enjoyed the trips we went on. So I think like for me, it was like, these were like times of like real like spiritual mountaintops in my experience, like times where I felt like very close to Jesus, times where I had, you know, like quite a bit of fun, like extrovert pack, like all your friends, you're like living together, you're doing all this cool stuff, you're like worshiping together, eating together. I was like, great. And then just like really seeing like, oh, wow, this is like something like people live their lives, like loving other people and like talking about Jesus and like that, you know, in a really pretty simplistic way. I was just like, I just can like play with kids all the time and like talk to them about Jesus and it's going to be great. And I think, yeah. So I think to me, it was like a little scary, like being the idea of like being like away from, you know, like, cause I think when you think of missions, obviously you think of like going out somewhere.
Sure.
And so I think there was like this sense of like adventure though, of like, this is really exciting. Like, this is where I've felt the closest to God, the times I've seen God moving. I'm going to get to do that. I'm going to get to like meet all these cool people and help people. I think, looking back and in college, so I went to college for ministry, and my sophomore teacher, she's, bless her, she had us do a savior complex quiz, and I tested off the charts for savior, and I was like, oh, or like it was like called like the Messiah complex, and I was like, you're not supposed to think you can like save other people and that everything's your responsibility, and like, you know, so like that, I'm really thankful that she did that, because it kind of checked. I mean, I don't necessarily blame like church, you know, it's like when kids are like, I want to go do this, I love Jesus, you're not going to be like, no, don't do that. But I think internally, I think, you know, we have this like the American exceptionalism idea of, and I think that like feeds into our churches of like, okay, well, obviously like Christians in America, I don't think I never like wrote it out and really like,
you were never actively thinking this.
Yeah, but it is this like this idea that like, oh, well, like people over there must not know Jesus because like we're, you know, we kind of
Yeah.
have this. And then there's like the whiteness factor too, right? Of like, oh, this white girl wanting to like go to all these Black neighborhoods in New Orleans and save them. It's like they like these moms and grandmas and dads, like they know Jesus in like they know him very well. Like we don't need this like 15-year-old. And it's like, I think that's not to say that like people from different backgrounds shouldn't come together and like that you can't like share Jesus with each other and like build each other up. But I do think there was this white superiority complex that you don't really get told. I mean, like nobody questioned about that. I think save the world.
I think I love the journey that the Lord's had you on with discovering this, and what you were just saying there about like no one questions that, no one ever asks you about, and I think from my perspective, it's likely because the no ones, like all of the people, would have been people who too were, you know, wrapped up in that, and not like, so it always takes someone outside of that perspective to help you, you know, see that, you know, see the other side of you, you know, and I think that's one of the beauties of continuing to have such diverse relationships with people, and not just like I know people in other races, but like where people where they're able to, hey, like random acquaintance, you know, in a classroom probably isn't going to have a conversation where you're going to receive the truth that you might have a white savior complex.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean?
Like you're not a safe person. I'm not going to spend my day.
And I also love how you aren't doing the thing that I think too often happens, where we throw the baby out with the bathwater, where it's like, oh, well then white people should never go on mission trips. And it's like, no, that's not.
Or never interact with anybody that doesn't look like them, which is like, hello, newsflash, you can't, because
and like
we live in a world where people live together.
You need that. Like you need, like the reason this is an issue is because there hasn't been enough of that. And in most of those interactions, the power dynamic isn't healthy enough to actually be able to have a real fruitful community where you can experience that stuff. And I think I was just having a conversation earlier today, not to I'm talking more than I normally do in these interviews.
Oh, it's a conversation. Go for it.
But I was having a conversation earlier today about just about obeying the Lord, right? And making sure that we are living lives that are faithful, and you know, doing all that we can, you know, with the Spirit's leadership and help to live holy and set apart. And the conversation at the same time was like, but what about legalism, and what about living life to make sure you're not, you know, just trying to check off boxes or doing something to earn his love? And it's like, yes, both of those are things that we need to, you know, be aware, like be aware of the one while pursuing the other. And it doesn't mean because legalism, which is bad, is a reality, I shouldn't pursue holiness, you know, and I shouldn't, you know, like you gotta recognize them both.
And I think it's almost like a legalism, like legalism's foothold is like that part of us that's like, well, what if me like seeking the Lord is really being legalistic, and I don't know, you know, it's like this, and you're
still trying to own it. You're still trying to run that.
And I think so much of it, for all, I feel like we talk in our, I mean, this can be a whole nother rabbit trail, but like, as somebody that like has been like, I've had an anxiety diagnosis since I was really little, like growing up in this, like, well, like you're not supposed to be afraid, and like trust in the Lord and all of these things, like, and I think sometimes we really twist these things. I'm like, why do we like somehow like we read a Bible verse and then we're like, what's the meanest way this could be taken? And like, that's how we take it. Like God's like, don't be afraid. And we're like, except he's yelling at you like a drill sergeant not to be afraid, instead of like, what if this is like, you know, the vibe of like parents comforting a child after a nightmare. You're not like screaming at your kids, like, how dare you not trust me to keep this house safe because you're afraid, you know? So that's another rabbit trail, but like really grew up trying to be like, okay, I'm like not going to be anxious about this because the Bible says don't be anxious about anything. So I won't. And it's like, I real, like so much of like this like legalism, I think is really like kind of built in of like, you have to do the right thing. And if you do the wrong thing, like not only is it going to mess you up and your relationship with God, you're going to mess everybody else up and you're going to totally ruin it. Or like, I don't know. I just like realized how much of, really is this like this anxiety of like this kind of belief that like, I don't know, when you dig down into it, it's like, man, like, do I really believe that if I'm like seeking Jesus, like God's going to be like, well, screw you. We're just going to like lead you the wrong way. Like,
right.
Or that like,
You didn't measure up.
yeah.
And
like,
it's almost like
gospel is like that we literally do not.
Exactly.
And so, like,
yeah. It's almost like we don't ever
taking that as like,
did we fully receive that gospel? Like,
yeah, like a freedom to be like, okay, like I'm going to like, I think we almost take it as like, let's just really like dig into the fact that we are terrible and like we can never measure. And God's like, this is literally, I just don't think that was the point. I don't think Jesus like it wants us to be like, so like I remember being like, oh my gosh, like I didn't read my Bible today. Like, what's going to happen? Or like, I'm praying about, should I go to this college or this college? I talk to like students all the time who are like praying about, and they're like, man, like, I just think God, it's this kind of, our American culture is very, and probably also like white American culture is very like, we do not do well with any sort of like ambiguity.
Yeah.
And you can look at, just spend a day and pay attention to how many labels are on things when you are out in the world. I was behind a bus the summer after coming home from Uganda, and there are 6 labels on this bus. One of them that said bus. And I was like, wow, what a relief to know. Like, I was like, wow, we just need things like mapped out. And I think sometimes we feel that like, it's not this like God's calling us into this relationship and a walking with God and, loving God. And that's not a checklist. And I think we're so worried sometimes about making sure we do everything exactly the right way, or like everything's gonna fall apart, that we forget that there's like, that we can like trust God to take us with him. I don't know. Like,
oh, that is it right there. There's the, even after receiving Jesus and the Holy Spirit's empowering, and like we are pursuing our calling and our mission, we never, well, I shouldn't say we never, often we don't actually let go of the reins of the whole thing. It's like, okay, so now I've got Jesus. So now I'm strong enough to take care of my sin and like make sure that I am obedient. And now I'm strong enough to like, and it's like, no, like that's not the deal. Like he says, come to me who are weary and heavy laden. I will give you rest. It's a gift. He's always giving it to us. And we're so busy then, like we'll take the gift of rest, but then we'll also take, more responsibility.
So we make rules about how we're supposed to rest. And how do you know if you've rested in the right way? A great way to know if you struggle with legalism is if hearing this conversation, you're starting to worry about if you're legalistic and starting to make like really strict rules for yourself about how not legalistic you're going to be.
Here's the way.
Like that's a really great way to know.
Away from legalism. I need to make sure that I
every
rest
day.
More.
Yeah, but it's hard. It is. Like, and it's
and I love how you said in this culture, like that is one of the things that's so hard about this culture, because it is so transactional, and it's a culture that definitely wants labels and boxes and clarity for things. We do not do well with the unclear. And I think one thing that should become clear for people in this conversation is life with Jesus is a life of ambiguity.
Yeah.
It's a life of trust.
Mystery.
Yeah. Like there is literally a mystery to God. And we spend so much time trying to remove the mystery. And like, and that's part of even how our brain works. Where, when we walk into a room, like we are engaging with people and objects based on our prior knowledge.
Right. Yeah. Which is like part of how you function as a human, and is okay. Like, and I think like as somebody that like deals with things, it's like I know I'm like in like a circle when I'm like, or a vicious cycle when you're like, I'm anxious about how anxious I am about this, or like how legalistic I am. And it's just like, I think if I had heard this conversation when I was in high school, I would have made a list and I would have like been so stressed out about how legalistic I am. And oh, God's probably so disappointed that I'm not taking it. And I just, sometimes I imagine Jesus like, I'm just trying to tell you that I love you. And you're like, I've got this. I'm going to stress out about this.
I don't want to give them misconception, because I think I've done that so far in this conversation, that this isn't something I struggle with. Like, no, I literally struggle with this, but I'm aware at least of that. And I'm like, okay, I need to let go. Just let go of it.
Yeah. And I think so much, I don't know, I read just sometimes like, people can use the Bible. If Satan can use the Bible to twist it and try and mess up Jesus, like we can do this to ourselves. So sometimes I'm just like, I just need to read the Jesus story part. Like, let me just read about Jesus. And I spend a lot of time in the 4 gospels, because sometimes I'm like, all right, these other people are doing weird things with all the other ones. Let me just like focus in. And it's just like, I mean, half of what Jesus did was he just walked around and talked to people and ate food. And like, I think the idea that somehow like our life is going to be, not that our lives are going to be exactly like Jesus, but it's like, yeah, I don't know. You think of like half the commands in the Bible and they're about like feasting, like we are going to have a party, like it's just like, I think it's like it's life with Jesus. And it is like, how do you like leaning into that, like the love that God has for me and for other people, and like leaning into the work that God is already doing, like that it's not like there's no corners on a globe, but there's no square inch.
Unless you're a flat earther. Like
I've revealed myself to be not a flat earther. The mystery's gone. I ruined it. But yeah, I think like it's fun looking back at like high school me and being like, sometimes I think high school me would look at me and be like, like, is she a Christian, because she's not legalistic enough? But I think, and sometimes I like when I'm feeling more generous with myself, maybe I think of like, maybe this is like what high school me was longing for, was this like ability to like, wow, like it doesn't have to be all about like the checklists and the making sure you're doing everything exactly perfectly. And like, it's not about like who you exclude. Like, it's about like this leaning into this like all encompassing love of Jesus. And like, which is, I mean, sometimes when I feel like I'm getting too much on my high horse, I'm like, all right, let's think about the thing I know about Jesus is that he made everybody angry. So I'm like, okay, who would Jesus eat with currently? That it would make me annoyed to know that he went to dinner at their house. And then I'm like, okay, that's people I'm not like loving, that those are people I'm excluding. And I need to like pray that Jesus would like open my heart to those people.
So
because
good right there. Maybe
it is something about going to literal Bible college, is that you start to horrifyingly resonate with the Pharisees a little bit. And you're like, oh no, like they're like the teachers of the law,
the bad guys.
the people who studied. And I love to bash on the Pharisees, but sometimes I'm like, man, like I'm the people, like we're the people here. We're like and I'm like, oh, like when we start to like use the Bible to like beat people up is when I can tell you like, we can have different opinions on things, but it's like Jesus, like if our theology is starting to make people think that God hates them, like that's not it. That's not it. Like, I'll tell you that, like, that's like, and if it's starting to exclude, like Jesus, the thing Jesus did all the time that pissed the most people off, I don't know if you can say that on this podcast.
We can say that.
Made the people the most angry is like the people he included. And so it's like I I think my like views have like shifted somewhat since high school. I think.
Well, let's talk about some of that journey. Let's get back to some of the narrative of your story here. I mean, obviously we can have some beautifully rich conversation about everything. This is one of the things I love.
We go on lots of bunny trails.
We do, y'all. But like, so you said things have shifted. So walk us through a place where you felt like so you already talked about how in your class with your teacher,
yes.
I think you said sophomore
Jana
year.
Sundin.
Yes. So that was one marker where you felt like, oh, there was a perspective shift happening. What was a little bit of the journey like between that and maybe the next perspective shift, and what brought you to that?
So a big part of my like life story has been the time I spent in Uganda. And so I studied abroad there my junior year of college for one semester at Uganda Christian University, which like, it just makes me like the amount of people that I talk to about this, and they think, one, that like Uganda's a city in the country of Africa. And two, that like are either like astounded that there could be a college in Uganda, or that like I was going there for anything except to like serve, like that it's like, I'm like, no, I'm like, learning from Ugandan professors. Like I have a Ugandan supervisor at my practicum. I think that was like, it was a really big eye opener for me just on like some of these like things that I didn't like, things that I realized, like, I was like, wow, do I like have this view that like, because I'm like a white girl from the Midwest, like that I know more about Jesus, or that I must be like, I'm not gonna, that there, how could there be like this incredible school and all these incredible like communities of faith in somewhere like Uganda. And I just like, I have met like, it just shamed me almost like the like community focus and the humility and the what is it called when you share? What's the word called? Generosity. Thank you. Like I remember the like lowest point where I was like, I have a problem is like in Uganda, it's like rude to eat food in front of other people. Like you just share what you have. Cause like, obviously. And so my roommate would like, her boyfriend bought her chocolate and she's like giving me half of the chocolate bar. And I was like, I don't even know what to do with, you're in college. Okay. You don't have that much. And I was at the lowest point where I was like, I have chocolate. I want to eat it now. My roommate's in the room and I don't want to share it. So I hid in my closet to eat my chocolate. And I said to myself, this is the worst thing I've done in my entire life. Like this is like, I'm so like, this chocolate bar cost me $1. Like, and I can't share. So after I was like, we're just going to have to like, we were talking a lot about how, from a like white Western perspective, we think a lot about, when we think about spirituality, we think like, okay, if we like can think correctly, then that's going to trickle down. It's going to change our hearts. And then we're going to act different. And we talked a lot about how like, actually it's like your actions are going to change your heart. So like, if I wait all that time to be generous, I'm going to be eating chocolate in my closet for a long time. And I was like, I'm just going to have to start sharing. And it was like the simplest thing. And I didn't think of myself as like a greedy person or like, anyways, that's just one example that I don't know why I told
that. That's really good. That's got me thinking about when the Lord sent me out from the way I was doing church to the way I feel like he's calling me to now, which was more characterized by like having the right systems and the right thought process for, the theological understanding of all of it, which theology is important. And then we will now get to the mission, right?
Yeah.
Once that's all, and the inverse was so much like, okay, a mission focus where it's like, let's go and do, and like learn and grow on the way. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that sounds so much like what you're describing there. So that's good.
It was really, I think I also like, I went to Uganda, like kind of like being like, okay, this is like the first time I'm going to be in a situation where I might be like the only white person in the room, because I went to a predominantly white college. I grew up in Grace Lake, which is like getting more diverse, which is wonderful, but is still like a predominantly white, went to predominantly white schools. And I was kind of like, I had this very naive idea of like, I'm going to like understand what it's like to be like a minority in a different context.
Yeah.
And I'm going to learn so much about that. And I think like I learned a very slim amount of like, yeah, when you walk into a room and all the heads turn towards you. But like that was the difference being in Uganda was like this white privilege that I knew I experienced in America. And I thought somehow like, oh, I'll like escape that in Uganda was just like heightened 1,000
Oh,
fold.
wow. So they all looked at you like you were.
Yeah, like literally had children like come up to me at my practicum and like touch my skin and say like, your skin is good because it's white.
Right.
And I was like, oh my, like, I don't want to, like, how do I, or like chase after our bus, like we're movie stars because we're white people. There was just this assumption. And I'm sure like some people didn't, but like generally it was like, oh, well, like you're a white person, so you're probably a Christian, you're probably rich, you're probably a good person. Which,
and I think some of it's white and some of it's American too, like you said before, the American
sure.
exceptionalism. Like because I now engage with a couple of different churches, in one in Kenya, one in Uganda, and the one in Kenya I deal with a lot, and they all have a very heightened perspective of who I am, and like, and I'm like, yo, like I'm just a dude. Like, like I am nothing like special that you guys need to get so excited about.
Right.
Oh, Pastor Fury's calling. It's like, whoa. So I see that.
And so like trying to like talk to kids about like, okay, like God made you and like God made me, and we're both like made in God's image. And so we're both wonderful. And kind of realizing like at my practicum, like I was like, okay, maybe like the best thing that I can do, like the biggest work I can do is like eat a little bit against this idea of like, truly like this white supremacy idea, this like evil, insidious thing that has like is all over the world, unfortunately. And like, okay, like these kids are going to see me respect my supervisor, and they're going to see me literally, I don't even know how to cross the street here safely, look to like a Ugandan person for direction, and I'm going to follow their leadership, and I'm going to be asking them questions on how to do things, and I'm going to be showing them respect. And I was like, okay, like that. And I did notice like a difference between kids at the children's home I was at and the school, where the kids from the school didn't interact with as many like outside Western people, and the kids at the home did. I was like, maybe this is from like watching us like maybe make fools of ourselves a lot, but also like, okay, like I can like be in this relationship with my supervisor and I'm learning a ton, and kids watching me learn, like that can flip. Like we would tell our students, I went back to work for the program taking care of American students that were studying abroad there. And we would tell our like nursing students, like your main job at your internship is to walk in and introduce yourself as not the doctor, because people will just assume. Do not cut people open. Like, I don't care if someone hands you a scalpel, like, a second year biology student, like, do not do that. And so it was like, I don't know, just, I learned a lot about, unfortunate, like, I think I had kind of always built up like missionaries as like, oh, they're like the good guys. Like maybe there's bad people have done bad things, but like the missionaries were there and learning like how deeply entrenched the church was, the white church at least, was in slavery and in colonialism. And that just like really wrecked me. And it opened my eyes to a lot. I think just like getting out of the US and like seeing things from a different perspective, I was like, okay, well, like what else is happening like in the world? And I came back from, my friends were like, are you okay? I was like, I am not. They're like, do you talk about
you're talking about, is this right after your semester?
Yeah, I studied abroad and I came back. I think that was when we met, and everyone was like, are you okay? You just like only talk about injustice. And I was like, that's literally all I have room for, because like this is happening over here and this happened, and I don't know.
And that's why I know that to be the characterization of you, because like ever since I've known you,
she's always on a rant, and she's always...
No, it's good, like it's healthy, and it challenges me, and I love it. So I appreciate having you in my life. And before I forget, I want to just celebrate something that you said, which I thought was so key in the way that you were trying to take down white supremacy in the eyes of the Ugandans, was to be intentional about submitting to minority leadership. Like that's huge. That's huge. And I think that's a thing that many people can learn from, because it's not a thing that most white people have to do.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're not in positions where they generally have to do that. They
Yeah.
can choose to go somewhere else, or
Yeah.
generally speaking, just naturally be the ones that are put in leadership, but
Yeah.
to
Yeah. And you
then,
just kind of assume like, well, like I must just deserve it.
right,
Like,
right.
must just be great.
So anyways, we'll get back to now you're back. And I know, so you go back. So
Yes.
let's talk a little bit about you coming home and recognizing it was like a new experience for you coming
Yeah.
home. And like, were you shell shocked? What was that like? What was
Yes.
going on?
I shell shocked in several ways. Like you talk about culture shock, and there's just like the difference that you also talk about, like country shock, and just like, like really basic things, like what types of, buildings are you living in, and what side of the road do people drive on, and all of that stuff. So there's, I don't think I had experienced a fluorescent light in, 6 months. So I like came in, I was like, the first time I walked into a grocery store, and I was just like, there's just like stuff everywhere. Like we're just stuff, and my room is big, and I can drink out of the shower if I want to. Like I am wealthy beyond,
Right.
like this is absurd, like to an embarrassing amount. And like, what do I do with this? And then just really realizing how I think unfortunately there's been this kind of, at least in like the circles I was growing up in, this idea of like, like, oh, this is like the social gospel. Like if you are thinking about how, to take care of people, like that's just kind of this like extra thing. And like, if you focus too much on that, you're going to lose the like Jesus part of it, which I was like, I just don't know if you've like read, like, are we reading the same book? The same,
So crazy.
like, is your God also a homeless Jew? He has a baby. Like, I just don't like, like women like followed him around and like paid for his way, and he like healed people, and he ate with people, and like, anyways. So
I just am like, what are you doing with Matthew 25? Like, walk me through that. Like,
yeah. So I think, just really realizing like, wow, like a lot of the gospel, like, it's just very, I don't know. It was hard to like be coming like from, a context where like, I had just learned about like genocide, and I had just learned about, and then like, you're coming back in, and it's just like, how do we get people to engage in small groups? And I'm like, I just like, what? Like, these are the issues we're talking about? Or like, people are mad about like, I came back to college, and like the toilet paper was like not as like, it was like 1 ply instead of 2
one ply toilet paper?
I don't know. People were calling it half ply. It was thin, but I was like, you can drink out of your toilet if you need to, like, and you're complaining about it. Was just like this kind of like, I was like, I just don't even know what to do with, like, I was just angry. I was angry at myself. I was angry that I felt like really caught up in like systems that were like hurting people and oppressing people. I felt like I had been lied to, or that like the whole, like, my whole upbringing, not like my parents, like not individuals, but just like, I just feel like this whole, like, we're doing harm or we're not stopping it. And like, I don't want to be engaging in things that are hurting my host family in Uganda. And I don't want to be part of a system that oppresses people and hurts people, and where I get the like worldly benefits of that. And I don't know what to do about it. And so
it sounds like you had a whole nother conversion.
I think it was like, it was.
And the reason why I'm pointing it out like that is because that's similar on another scale. What happened to me August of 2018? Because I remember coming back to our staff meeting, and they hadn't done anything different, but I was just like, wait,
something is different.
What are we doing? So I get it.
Yeah, I think this is why we connected. So like, and I got plugged into Mosaic because which is a diversity and intercultural. I don't even know how to describe it. It's great, but it was at the college I was at. And I started going there talking about all of these different issues that I was like, this is stuff that matters and stuff I want to know the answers to. And I was like, I just get to sit here and I can be the new person. Like, I don't have to be like, you know, because in my friend group or in my family, it was like I felt like I was the one person who was like, we need to, you know, do
right.
you know, I'm sitting
You're,
here
you're
with
the voice of you know,
yeah, I'm sitting here with
vulnerable.
like a 60-year-old Black woman, and I'm like, shit, this is not new to her, that
Right.
there's injustice in the world. And I can be the like, I'm like, I feel dumb and like I don't know anything, and I can like sit here and like learn and be in relationship, and like people are talking about these things that I really I care about and I'm feeling broken about, and like just yeah, I think that saved me. That saved me from like being like, I'm done with the church, I'm done with Christians. Because it was like right in my college, right where I was, right in the same place I left, was this community of people who were diverse and who had different perspectives and who did care about justice and who cared about people who were suffering and people who were being marginalized. And so
and you guys, you're going to hear more about Mosaic and their ministry if you stick around. They're actually going to be my focus for 2022 as I'm telling documentary stories with my initiative called Stories from the Edges. So be on the lookout for more of that. But her story is a part of you know, those that have been blessed by this ministry. But continue, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was like, oh yeah, we talked about Mosaic before we got recording. So, but yeah, I think about a lot about how, like, I don't know, I remember being like in high school and, you know, in the throes of legalism and being like, just so afraid that I was going to walk away from Jesus, and just praying like, okay, don't let me do that. And I feel like there have literally been times where I'm like, there are times where, you know, when you learn that the church participated in a genocide, it is hard to feel like it's something a community you want to be a part of.
Right.
Still.
Right.
Or that could have anything to do with Jesus. And I think I don't think that had anything to do with Jesus. Let's just be very clear about that.
Right. He was not leading in the genocide.
No. And like those people were not following him. And I think like hanging on to Jesus in the times where, you know, there have been times where I'm like, does God hate women? And it's like, Jesus didn't. Okay, sticking with my boy. Like, you know, or like, I just like the story of Jesus, and the more and more I get into it, the more I'm like, wow, Jesus was just, you know, every Advent, I'm like, Jesus included like all these people who were excluded from the temple were like right there when he was born, like the presence of God that they weren't supposed to have access to was like right here. And so it's
almost like just leaning into Jesus more and more and more resolves it all.
Yeah. And it's hard. And sometimes I'm like, are you really going to let these people like claim you? Because I have a problem with that. And I think a lot of people, you know, people in the church a lot of them are like, oh, like all of these like young people are walking away, and what do we do? And I think sometimes it could be that you're doing everything right. In some cases, it's like, I don't see Jesus in this setting right now. Like, I don't see like a love for people. Like and I think a lot of my friends have felt, you know, it's like, whether it's with the exclusion of like people in the LGBTQ community, or responses to the Black Lives Matter movement, or, you know, so many different things, you know, migrant crisis, or, you know, refugee crisis. It's just like the way we respond to people who have been historically marginalized. It's like, you know, you think about Matthew 25, it's not just like, oh, what would Jesus do? It's like, Jesus says that's him. Like, so if you won't let this person into your church, you have said that Jesus can't come in here. And so that's an issue, you know?
And I always think that passage is so interesting too, because the people that want to remove our responsibility towards loving the vulnerable and only focus on the gospel and like the theological doctrine, like, so Jesus, just so we're clear, he aligns like that with him, and like, yo, this is a marker of whether or not you actually have the salvation that you claim. You know, so it's like, you want to talk about the gospel, Don't miss this huge sign. He's like, here's the flag. Are you waving
he's
this
like,
flag?
if you want to know, if we're on the same side.
Yeah.
And I think I remember feeling very much like I am so like, I don't know. I used to be, you like read those words like, oh, wow, like Jesus included us. And when you've been a Christian since you're 8, it's kind of like, okay, cool. Like, I guess I was like lying about taking someone's toys before, like, okay, but it's like learning about like my participation in systems that harm people in very real ways. I was like, I am like so dang lucky to be included in this family. Like even me, like I get to be a part of this. Like, and like
that's so that is so healthy. That is super healthy, because I think the direction that you can be sent on as you're seeing, all this injustice. And this is a conversation I constantly have in our micro church, Kingdom Justice Project. As you're witnessing all this injustice, it's real easy to make it all out there and like, look at all these people doing XYZ. Like, how could they? And never take the time to stop and pause and be like, so what part are you playing in any way? What aren't you saying about your participation in the
which is like horrifying. Be like,
humility and grace.
Yeah. And it just, but I think, it goes back to like, I don't know. I remember being in like high school and being like, okay, like what's God doing and how do I participate in it? And that is like, God is like dismantling systems of oppression. Like that is, go back to the Exodus. Like that's kind of his thing. Like,
right.
And like, so I think, and if Jesus aligns with marginalized people, it's like, okay, well, I want more. It's less about like me coming in to save the margin. And it's more like, I want to be where you like you're where Jesus is. Like, that's where I need to be. Like in talking about, I don't remember who, I'm plagiarizing somebody, some smart person said, it's like less about ministry, like to the margins, and it's ministry. Like Jesus has always been about ministry from the margins. Otherwise, Jesus would have been born in Herod's palace. He would not have been born in a barn.
Right.
And
that's good.
So,
that's good.
Yeah, it just is like, sometimes it can be, especially in the last couple of years, like just very disheartening and be like, is like there have been days where I've been like, I know you said you wouldn't flood the earth.
But there's a myriad of ways that
However, you are a creative God. And I am confident that you could just take us all because and I was like, yeah, that feels about, you go from being like, wow, the world, like in one Bible book, it's like and everything is good, to being like, I'm actually going to drown all of you and restart from scratch. I'm like, I used to be like, why would God do that? And there have been some times in the 2020s where I've been like, I can understand. I'm glad that hasn't happened to us, but I can understand what the impetus behind it. So
let's fast forward.
The point is that God's working, and there's like great people and wonderful people, and gotta lean into that.
Yeah. And I love how you said, I mean, you almost said it. I felt like you were saying it. Just focus on being where Jesus is.
Yeah.
And I love that. I really love that. And I think it brings us back to the simplicity. Like, real talk, you guys, as this recording was happening, like the Lord was simplifying all of this. Like, I have multiple screens and camera angles and all this stuff as I'm continuing to explore using YouTube and making documentaries and all that stuff. And like, as I always have conversations with Morgan, one of the things that I feel like is a direct result of our interactions, that I feel like the Lord uses you to challenge the simplicity that I know he's called me to. Like, one of the things in my second conversion that I felt like the Lord was really trying to speak into my heart was this new monasticism, like this life that is more characterized by just the presence of God and like and the rest is like, okay, there's this and there's that. But like, it's so easy when you get caught up with, the machine, and even like turning the focus on the mission amongst the poor, like there can be like then a machine and a system of trying to do that like you've now just found a way to work the presence of God out of the whole thing. Yep. And you're just doing the things, And so I'm always reminded, like, even in these interactions, like the digital conversation here, like the complexity so easily confuses us on where God is and who he is. And when you strip away so much of the other stuff, it's like, and there he is. There he is. He's the man who's, down and out and doesn't have a place to stay. He's the one who's been shunned over here, and he's the one that's locked away over there. And he's in so many of these unassuming places and spaces that people don't really look to. And that's the heart behind what I want to be doing. But I got to be careful that I actually go with Jesus.
Yeah, it can be easy to get caught up in like the aesthetics of something, or trying to be like, how do we do it? Something that, as you were speaking about that, another thing that blows me away about Uganda and Ugandans is hospitality, which I think was the H word I was trying to find.
There you go.
Generosity too, but hospitality. Yeah. And they like, I feel like the time I've spent in different circles, it's like there'll be Bible verses that get quoted a lot. And a Bible verse I heard quoted a lot in Uganda was like, make sure to show hospitality to visitors, because you never know when you could be entertaining angels unaware, or something along those lines. Yeah. And like, I really felt like there was this like, there was the aspect of like white American person coming in. There was also, and which I was able to witness through seeing like other Ugandan visitors come. And like, so I was like, okay, it's not just like the interactions with somebody who's like these other racial and, nationality aspects of it. It's also just like built into their
they're just Hispanic
culture and their faith of like, well, like essentially like this could be Jesus,
right?
Like you could be, and I felt that as like, not that like, oh, I'm God now, but like just this like, well, you could be a gift from God. Like, thank you, Jesus. We have visitors. Like that was the most common prayer I heard was like, thank you so much for our visitors. And just this attitude of like every person you receive as like, we know everyone's made in the image of God, but also like, well, this could be like, you could be like God's gift to me today. And like, what if you're a messenger from God in disguise? What if you're God himself in disguise? I think like, I was like, dang, like if we treated people like that, like they mattered.
Like every person, every interaction is a gift from God.
It just, I was like, always so like the generosity and hospitality just always like blew me away, made me want to be more like them, made me want to be more like Jesus. Like it just,
and that is so baked into God's plan for how he wanted his people to be developed. Like one of the things that I think when I have conversations with people in regards to spiritual leadership that is often neglected is if you look at some of the passages that are often quoted when we're talking about the biblical qualifications for elders, hospitality's right up in there. Like,
throw a good feast.
It's like that was important. That was an important thing.
So much so and welcoming people in. Like, it just,
what's in the leaders is what he wants replicated in his people. That's the point. So I love that you highlight that. And that's one of those things that I wish I would continue to grow. And that's one of the things that I love about my wife. Like she blows me away in that. And I constantly am like, okay, I have
been on the receiving end and a gift, truly.
Yeah. I feel like we could continue this for an eternity and it would all be gold.
Yeah.
But for the sake, I'm just saying, like, I love it. But for the sake of winding this down, and maybe we'll have you
Yeah.
back in another season. Let's look forward at kind of the season of life that you're in now, and what are some of the places where, now this, I didn't prepare you for this question, but what are some of the places where you are feeling hopeful? Like where is the Lord just blessing you with hope for where he might be leading you, or what he's doing in the world and in your context?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So just for some background for people that don't know me, I my mom is like very, very immune compromised, which has meant that I think the pandemic has been like so difficult for everyone in so many different ways. For us, it's been really difficult in that like we have to be very, very careful about like not bringing anything home. And so that has meant, as the world has kind of opened up, that's meant like there are kind of like feelings of like we're just kind of still living in this quarantine life. Not as much, thankfully. We're, I'm vaccinated and she's been able to be vaccinated, so that's been like a gift to be able to feel like I can interact with more people, but still like not going out to eat, not doing some of these things that used to be gathering in large groups. So that's been really hard in a lot of ways. I'm very much a people person, and so that's something where I've really been trying to like dig into my like one-on-one relationships, but I'm really hopeful, maybe in more of like a desperate way. Like, this
Like,
has got to get
please,
better
Jesus.
soon. Like, I just like, the hopeful, like, I just, I would love to be in a group. I would love to be in like a bigger worship setting someday. Like, again, that would be great. But I think I'm hopeful in that, like, I heard somebody say, this was a long time, that like the pandemic has been like apocalyptic, not in the way of like end of the world, but in like more of like the biblical sense of like, it's been this like unveiling of like seeing things that you didn't see before. And maybe it's like, it slowed us down, when you have nothing to do except bake bread and watch Tiger King. Or
and remember what's essential. That word took on a whole new meaning, right? Like everything was, what was essential? What's essential? What's the minimum requirements?
Yeah, I think it slowed us down to really like, to, I think, lament in a lot of ways, which is not fun. And we don't like to slow down, maybe potentially because of that, is that it leaves space for that. But I think, like the murder of George Floyd and the reaction that like the amount of people that rose up to say like, this isn't okay. Like, we need to change, like there's some things wrong with our systems. That like, I think part of it is, and unfortunately, like, we could talk about how like, unfortunately, a lot of white stamina towards that has been lacking, after it. But I think there are a lot of people who are like, who have had their eyes opened to things, the realities of the world, and are like, okay, well, like, it's up to us to like be the change and to like put pressure on things, and to make our, you think about like the church, like how do we make our churches, like how do we work against this like insidious white supremacy that has like invaded our culture? Like, how do we make sure that we are, truly loving our neighbors? What does that look like? What does it look like to care for people? What does it look like to, love the sick, loving the sick? Sometimes I'm like, listen, if you don't want to wear your mask, like maybe you're not wanting to love the sick today. I don't know. That's not, it's been really like hard, like to have, I like just every interaction I have with people, I'm like, the choices that like you make, like that we make as a community, I think a lot of times we think like, my choices just affect me. We're in an individualistic culture. And I'm like, okay, no, like that, like if the choices you make impact me and they impact, I have somebody I love very deeply at home who like, I can't get sick, and so I think there have been like all sorts of ways where we're, I think every time I talk to somebody that's like in high school, I'm just so hopeful. I'm so hopeful. They are they just like care very deeply and are very engaged in ways that I think a lot of like, in some ways I'm like, there's ways where I'm like, okay, like don't stress out so much about everything, but also like just this very deep, like, no, we're gonna take care of each other and we're gonna take care of people. And we're like, if there's something going on that's not right, like we want to address that, and we can. And that is, I think, if you can just get some high schoolers out there. I mean, they truly believe that, like, and they have the energy to do things. And so I think I'm very hopeful in the sense that like there's a lot, the things that make me not hopeful, that make me be like, just, maybe not rain, maybe ice or something, but then, you talk to a high schooler and you're just like, maybe like the world is going to be okay. Like maybe we're going to care more about each other and about people than we do about making money or doing things fast and efficiently. And so, so that has me hopeful. And
that is exciting.
Yeah. And I think,
and I know you've always been passionate
about
my
neighbors.
What's that?
Anytime I talk to my neighbors, I'm like, this is like, I love my neighbors. So they give me hope for the world too. There's hope for, loving your neighbor and loving God. And yeah.
That is awesome. And I'll tell you, Morgan, whenever I talk to you, not only do I walk away feeling challenged, I too walk away feeling hopeful. Because I see you, and I don't want to sound like I'm ancient, but like we're in different generations, and
we are in different generations.
you're a reminder of the generation that's coming after me, and the heart for Jesus that is still vibrant in spite of so many of the ways that a lot of the structures maybe have tried to work against that. The history may have tried to work against that. And yet you cling to Jesus. And I feel like if there's anything anybody watching this will take away from the dynamic twists and turns, roller coasters of your story is, cling to Jesus. Everything else is
boils down to that.
Yeah.
An adventure. Yeah.
There you go. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I always come away from our conversations very encouraged, very like pumped up. So thank you.
Good. And I hope all of you guys out there watching and listening are also feeling very encouraged and pumped up. And hopefully you not only enjoyed this, but you enjoyed it enough that you want to share it with a friend, because I know that her story can be one that blesses not only you, but others. And we talked about the way that, we can impact folks. That is another way to do that. So having said that, appreciate you guys coming along the journey with us on season 2, episode 3 with Morgan Walker. So let's give her a hearty, clap here as we say goodbye. Thank you so much, Morgan.
Oh, thank you.